Pay close attention. Most people have no idea how the next 7 days are about to play out. And one wrong response can quietly unravel months of invisible preparation. What's about to unfold isn't random. It's the culmination of something that has been building pressure beneath the surface of your reality, and those who ignore the signs will pay a price they don't yet understand. The next week will expose everything: hidden motives, masked intentions, spiritual predators who have been waiting for the right moment to strike. This isn't a warning. It's a pattern already in motion. The shift didn't start this week. It started the moment you began noticing things that no one else seemed to see. A conversation that felt wrong. A person whose energy suddenly changed. A decision that required silence instead of announcement. These weren't isolated moments. They were markers of something larger moving into position, and the next 7 days will reveal whether you've been reading the signs correctly or misinterpreting the gravity of what's unfolding. Because while most people are focused on surface-level distractions, chosen ones have been sensing a deeper current pulling them toward a threshold they cannot see, but know is approaching. And this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think the pressure is external. They think the tension is circumstantial. But the pressure is internal. The tension is spiritual, and the threshold is irreversible. Over the next 7 days, people will reveal themselves, not through confession, not through confrontation, but through reaction. Spiritual predators, energy leechers, quiet rivals, masked doubters, they've been watching, waiting, calculating when you would be most vulnerable, and the moment you step into your next level of clarity, power, alignment, they will react. Some will try to distract you, some will question your decisions. Some will offer concern that feels like care, but carries the weight of control. And here's where it gets interesting. They won't attack you directly, they'll create confusion, they'll plant doubt in the form of reasonable questions. They'll offer help that quietly undermines your sovereignty. Because the ones who cannot match your frequency will do everything to lower it. And one careless reveal can cost you opportunities that are already aligning in silence. Most people don't realize that the attacks aren't always loud. They're often wrapped in politeness, concern, familiarity. A friend who suddenly asks too many questions. A family member who dismisses what you're building. A colleague who seems supportive but subtly competes for the same energy you're channeling. When ignored, they multiply. When entertained, they drain. But here's the part no one prepares you for. The people who will reveal their true intentions in the next 7 days are not strangers. They're the ones closest to you, the ones who know just enough about your plans to interfere without seeming malicious. The next 7 days require something most people cannot sustain: silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of insecurity, but the silence of absolute certainty that what you're building doesn't need validation, explanation, or permission. Because the moment you speak a plan out loud before it's rooted, its power begins to dissolve. Every goal, dream, intention you hold, it builds momentum in silence. But the second you expose it, people project onto it. Their doubts, their fears, their expectations, and suddenly your destiny is no longer vibrating on your frequency. This week will test your ability to hold information without needing to share it, to move without announcing your direction, to build without broadcasting your blueprint. Mystery has always held spiritual power, but in this specific 7-day window, it becomes currency. While the world moves toward radical transparency, oversharing, constant broadcasting, chosen ones are guided into the opposite direction. Their strength doesn't come from visibility, it comes from unpredictability, from moving in ways that cannot be tracked, anticipated, or manipulated by those who still operate from fear, envy, control. And this is the moment most people panic. They feel the pressure to explain themselves, to justify their choices, to prove they're not being secretive or withholding. But chosen ones understand silence is not secrecy. It's protection. It's precision. It's the energetic container that allows what's meant to unfold to do so without interference. The next 7 days will bring people back into your field. Old connections will resurface. Past relationships will attempt re-entry. Opportunities that once felt important will present themselves again. And this is where discernment becomes non-negotiable. Because not everyone who returns comes with pure intent. Some return because they sense you're about to rise and want to attach themselves to your momentum. Some return because they need something from you, but disguise it as reconciliation, closure, reconnection. Some return because they see you differently now. You're no longer the person they could control, diminish, ignore, and that shift in your energy triggers something in them they cannot explain. But here's what most people miss. The ones who are truly meant to be in your life during this next phase don't need to force their way back in. They align naturally, effortlessly, without negotiation, explanation, or justification. The relationships that require convincing, that demand you lower your standards, soften your boundaries, ignore red flags you've already identified. Those are not alignments. They're tests. And the cost of failing this test is higher than most realize. One wrong re-entry can drain months of progress. One misplaced trust can create interference in decisions that are already being orchestrated on a level you cannot see. Some people are sent to distract you from what's aligning. Some are sent to delay you from stepping into what's already yours. And some take delight in watching you lose your footing, not because they're consciously malicious, but because your clarity exposes their confusion, your boundaries highlight their lack of them, and your rising forces them to confront why they're still stuck. If you've been feeling unusually drained, anxious, distracted, or emotionally heavy in recent days, it's not random. Spiritual attacks don't always look like attacks. They look like exhaustion that has no physical cause, brain fog that appears suddenly. Emotional heaviness that doesn't match your circumstances. Relationships that suddenly feel strained for no logical reason. Over the next 7 days, this will intensify, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. You're aligning with something that threatens the frequency of those who benefit from your confusion, your hesitation, your self-doubt. When a chosen one begins to step into their power, clarity, purpose, the spiritual resistance increases proportionally. Forces that once ignored you now pay attention. Entities that fed off your uncertainty now scramble to create more of it. People who once dismissed you now feel threatened by the version of you they can no longer define, predict, or control. And this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think the resistance means they're off path. They think the pressure means they made a wrong turn. But the opposite is true. Resistance is confirmation. Pressure is proof. The stronger the opposition, the closer you are to something that was always meant for you, but required you to become unrecognizable to access it. Your vulnerability isn't fragile, but your energetic boundaries are precise. One conversation with the wrong person can create openings you didn't intend. One moment of doubt can invite interference you didn't authorize. One decision made from fear instead of clarity can redirect you into a timeline that looks similar but leads somewhere completely different. The next 7 days will present choices, not the kind you can take back, reconsider, or reverse if they don't work out. The kind that lock you into a trajectory, a frequency, a version of reality that once entered cannot be exited the same way you came in. These decisions won't always look monumental. They might look like small choices. Saying no when you used to say yes. Staying silent when you used to explain. walking away from something familiar because it no longer matches where you're going. Choosing solitude over compromise, choosing mystery over visibility, choosing alignment over approval. But here's the part no one prepares you for. The cost of these choices is immediate. The reward is delayed. Most people cannot tolerate that gap. They make the aligned choice, feel the discomfort, the loneliness, the doubt and reverse course before the alignment completes. They go back to what's familiar, what's comfortable, what doesn't require them to trust what they cannot see. And in doing so, they reset the entire process. The people you've been distancing yourself from, they'll sense your hesitation and reappear with perfect timing, offering exactly what you think you need, but packaged in a way that keeps you tethered to a version of yourself you've already outgrown. The opportunities you've been releasing, they'll present themselves again, not because they're meant for you, but because the universe is testing whether you truly meant it when you said you were ready for something different. Every test this week is designed to reveal whether your commitment to transformation is absolute or conditional, whether your alignment is rooted or performative, whether you're willing to endure the gap between decision and manifestation without collapsing back into what's known, because the next level doesn't reveal itself to those who are testing the waters. It reveals itself to those who have already burned the boats. While spiritual attacks intensify and discernment becomes critical, something else will happen over the next 7 days. Synchronicities will increase, not the kind that make you wonder if you're imagining things, the kind that are too specific, too perfectly timed, too aligned with your internal dialogue to dismiss as coincidence. Numbers that repeat in sequences you've been seeing for months. Songs that play exactly when you needed to hear their message. Conversations with strangers that mirror thoughts you had in private. Dreams that provide answers to questions you haven't asked out loud. These are not accidents, they're confirmations. Breadcrumbs. Energetic signals that you're moving in the right direction, even when it feels like you're moving alone. Most people dismiss these moments because they seem too small to matter, but you have learned not to dismiss what seems small. The universe speaks in whispers before it speaks in earthquakes, and the ones who pay attention to the whispers never need the earthquakes. But that's just the surface of it. The synchronicities aren't just confirmations, they're instructions. Each one carries information about timing, alignment, next steps. A conversation that confirms what you've been sensing. A delay that protects you from something you cannot see. A sudden knowing that arrives without logical explanation, but proves accurate days later. The next 7 days will bring so many of these moments that you'll be forced to choose. Either trust what you're receiving or explain it away. Either follow the pattern or dismiss it as projection. Either move with the current or resist it out of fear that you're being irrational. If you felt isolated, misunderstood, or disconnected from people who once felt close, the next 7 days will show you why. The isolation was never punishment, it was preparation. The loneliness was never rejection, it was refinement. The distance you felt from certain people, places, patterns, it wasn't because you were being left behind, it was because you were being repositioned. Chosen ones don't rise by staying connected to everything. They rise by releasing what no longer matches the frequency they're being called into. And that process requires isolation. Not forever, but long enough to remember who you are without the projections, expectations, definitions others placed on you. The confusion was necessary. The moments where you could not recognize yourself were necessary. The silence where no one seemed to understand what you were going through was necessary. Because the version of you that's emerging in the next 7 days could not have been formed in the presence of those who needed you to stay the same. This week, you'll begin to see the cost others paid for your evolution. the relationships that couldn't survive your transformation, the opportunities that dissolved because they were never meant for this version of you, the identities you had to abandon because they were incompatible with where you're going. And for the first time, you won't mourn them. You'll understand them. You'll see them as necessary casualties of a process that was always bigger than comfort, familiarity, or approval. There's a moment in every chosen one's journey where momentum shifts from something they create to something that carries them. The next 7 days mark that shift. What you've been building in silence, protecting in secrecy, nurturing in solitude, it's about to gain its own gravity, its own direction, its own inevitability. And once that happens, you cannot stop it. You can only steward it. Chosen ones often fear this moment because it requires surrender. Surrender of control. Surrender of timeline. Surrender of how they thought things would unfold. They've spent months, sometimes years, trying to force outcomes, manipulate circumstances, control variables. But the next 7 days will show them something different. The less they try to control, the faster things align. The more they release the need to know exactly how, the clearer the path becomes. The moment they stop forcing and start following, everything they've been chasing begins chasing them. But here's where it gets interesting. This shift doesn't happen gradually. It happens suddenly. One day, you're waiting. The next day, you're moving so fast you barely have time to process what's unfolding. One week, you're questioning if anything is happening. The next week, you're overwhelmed by how much is happening all at once. This is not chaos. This is acceleration. And it only happens to those who have done the internal work, released the attachments, and trusted the process even when it made no logical sense. By the end of these 7 days, you'll know who was meant to be in your life and who was only passing through. Not everyone who started this journey with you will finish it. Not everyone who believed in you at the beginning will celebrate with you at the end. And that's not betrayal, it's alignment. Some people were only meant to walk with you to a certain point. Their role was temporary, their presence was seasonal, and trying to keep them beyond their expiration creates drag, delay, and unnecessary suffering. The ones who stay are not the ones who agree with everything you do. They're the ones who respect your process even when they don't understand it. The ones who give you space to evolve without demanding you stay the same. The ones who trust your discernment even when your choices don't make sense to them. These are rare, and the next 7 days will reveal who they are, not through grand gestures or declarations of loyalty, but through quiet consistency, through respect for your boundaries, through absence of judgment when you make decisions that don't align with their expectations, through energetic support even when they're not physically present. Pay attention to who asks how you're doing without needing to know every detail, who celebrates your wins without needing to take credit, who trusts you're being guided without needing proof that you're on the right path. The next 7 days are a threshold. Once you cross it, there is no going back to who you were before. Not because the old version of you disappears, but because it becomes inaccessible. The frequency you're stepping into and the frequency you're leaving behind, they cannot coexist. You cannot operate from both. You cannot hold both identities. You cannot live in both timelines. By the end of this week, you will have made choices, released connections, and stepped into alignments that fundamentally alter your trajectory. And the moment that happens, the old reality becomes a memory you can observe but cannot re-enter. This is not loss. This is evolution. This is what you've been preparing for even when you didn't know what you were preparing for. The isolation prepared you. The confusion refined you. The synchronicities guided you. The tests strengthened you. And the next 7 days will show you why all of it was necessary. Most people fear the point of no return because they think it means they lose something. But chosen ones understand. The point of no return is not where you lose what was. It's where you gain what's next. And what's next has been waiting for you to become unrecognizable enough to receive it. If you're still watching, I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed the content and want to see more, please consider clicking the subscribe button. What unfolds in the next 7 days doesn't end here. Stay close. The pattern is just beginning to reveal itself.